sometimes our attention moves to certain things in the relative. That feeling of caught upness is as a result of like a hyper fixation on content. When you get identified with the content, that's when you get that feeling of like, I've been caught up or I've been absorbed. And then we automatically feel this is too overwhelming. And a lot of people don't really know what to do with that. The whole belief that we are separate originates from the belief that we are a person, right? We believe that our thoughts describe reality accurately. You are not a person. However, you have hyperfixated using your attention on a belief or a thought that says, I'm separate. And because of the power of our attention and the creation power of awareness, it has the freedom to adopt that identity. Life has no preference for what it gives attention to. If you really tune into this empty room, this no thing, as we say, you realize that this is absolutely uninterpretable by the mind. True nature kind of leaves with us tools to, go forward into the world with. We've been given this ability to tune into something, infinite access points. They're all taking you to one place. So, how do we exactly know when we're tuning into a facet of our true nature? If you're really going through one of these doorways, if you're actually tuning into a facet, there will be something in your experience that feels lighter. Just to know you're on the right trajectory would be to just watch, is my suffering, my aggregate, my total suffering, decreasing? But if you over-focus on awareness, you could bypass your experience. So it's like, how do we lend our focus to things equally so as not to bypass any part of the human experience as a whole, but still have a foot in the door of one of those facets, I would say, at all times. Everything is the same one thing, which makes finding that one thing incredibly difficult. However, once you realize, okay, there's this formless thing and it looks to me like it might make up everything else, you can start to look in objects, look in the finite for this self. There's only one truth remaining, and that is you, and you are everything, and you are this and that and neither. You are limited, unlimited, and beyond the concept of both. You're a person, you are infinite, but you are neither. And that is the perfect non-duality. It's being all the things or none of them, and both at the same time.
You're listening to the Non-Duality podcast. This is Nic Higham from thewholenessofexperience.com. And here with me is Colette Davie, whose Instagram handle is That's Beyond Duality. Life is that common factor in every experience. Indeed, every experience is made of life, but life appears and expresses itself through the changeful flow of experience. And that can be disconcerting, and we may experience a loss of control or a sense of predictability. That can be really scary if we focus on only the experiences themselves. We seem to disconnect from the background or the foundation. And so what we're talking about today is tuning back into the embrace of life. It's always accessible, it's always at hand, and you can reconnect to it at any time. Don't feel like a failure because you seem to have lost sight of that. I had a glimpse of my true nature, of a facet or quality of who I am beyond ego, and that lasted for some time. And then I got pulled back into the story. I just forgot who I was and identified with the ego once again. What's happening there is that you, life, are shifting your focus, and sometimes you seem to fixate on parts of your experience, your ever-changing experience, And that fixation creates a sense of solidity and identification with the things you're giving attention to, whether that be a thought, the body, or some possession, or some activity, some event, some situation. Once you become identified with any aspects of the relative, you're going to feel swayed by the forces of desire and fear. So we're talking about the possibility of relaxing your attention, your focus, and seeing the bigger picture, so to speak, to use an overused saying. But it's like that. What you fixate on is what you seem to become, because you don't really become anything, because you are always life and you are no thing in that sense. But you can experience yourself as anything, which is why you are both no thing as the absolute and everything as the relative. You can always come back to that which never changes. You never are disconnected from that. You are always that. And sometimes your attention moves to particular aspects or expressions of that. And that's actually okay. That's what's happening. That's the mode you're in right now. And that's okay.
Like you said, sometimes our attention moves to certain things in the relative. And, you feel like, oh, I've just been so caught up in something, whatever, caught up in work. I've been so caught up in fight with my significant other or relatives. That feeling of caught upness is as a result of like a hyper fixation, shall we say, on content. So when I refer to content, I mean the form. So anything in the manifestation, because obviously what you are is not part of the manifestation. It's the formless. So when you get identified with the content, that's when you get that feeling of like, I've been caught up, or I've been absorbed. And then we automatically feel this is too overwhelming. And a lot of people don't really know what to do with that. It's like, I'm so caught up. And then we've been taught to engage in more of the form. We've been taught to, go walk outside and do yoga and meditate. As formless, close to formless as those activities sound, they're actually still form. And I'm not saying they're not beneficial. Of course, they can settle the body and the mind, but they're not necessarily a long-term plan. So you're gonna take a walk out in nature and you go, I feel way more relaxed now. But then you'll see that your baseline threshold is still quite high for that hyperfixation. So then as soon as you get a call from your boss, there we go again, you get absorbed back in. Because as long as you're dealing with form to release form, you're going to stay at that threshold. But now what we're suggesting is when you're overwhelmed by form in some way, to tune into a formless facet of your true nature. So, and just to remind anyone listening that life has no preference for what it gives attention to. So, like we've said before, attention is a very special function. Attention is like a local awareness. And we know by now awareness is, we could say, your true self, just as a concession for now. So attention is like awareness making its little laser beam, localizing itself and putting itself into something via this human vessel. So that's what's so special about attention. Although attention is not awareness because it's small and it's local and it's personal. So I can have my attention on something or another person can have their attention on something else. It is still a funnel back to what we are. And that's why attention is so powerful. That's why it's introduced so much as a tool in meditation. Put attention on the breath. Put attention on a mantra. Do not pay attention to thoughts. Because this funnel, this awareness funnel called attention, when fixated, is literally, it's taking the formless and putting it into that form. It's super important. It's not just, then again, like in spirituality now, there's what you focus on, you attract. That's just like a very super spiritual way of saying what we're saying, and it's close, but we're getting more technical. We're saying that if you focus too much with your attention on a particular thought, that thought will become your reality. So if you focus too much on the thought, I'm limited, or I'm a person, or how can I get out of this personhood, that is actively creating your experience. It's creating your reality. You are not a person. However, you have hyperfixated using your attention on a belief or a thought that says, I'm separate. And because of the power of our attention and the creation power of awareness, it has the freedom to adopt that identity. So it's got the freedom to say, okay, whatever I'm focusing on, let me become it fully, because again, it has no preference. It's only us that have the preference. We don't want to be people, right? We want to realize our formless nature. Awareness doesn't mind whether it takes the form of someone who's completely identified versus a sage. So it's kind of up to us in our, let's just say, free will, or our own personal power, just for the purpose of the discussion, to regulate our attention and to decide where we place it. Because I would argue that that's enough to get you like 90% of the way. I remember when I first started years ago, the first thing I did was not pay attention to thoughts that represented separation. So my mind kind of decided, okay, these thoughts are separate thoughts, these thoughts are not separate thoughts. And it was like, if I was worrying about what someone thought of me, I would not pay attention to that thought because it represented separation. And I was trying to reframe my attention or my mind into not believing that I'm separate so that true nature would reveal itself. So I was kind of trying to lay the groundwork, and that's exactly how you do it. You're taught to focus on the breath because, it sounds simple, but it's actually very advanced. If you focus on the breath, it teaches us the arising and the passing of true nature. I've heard before, focus on the end of the out-breath. Where does that breath go? Where is life going? What's the space in which the breath is dissolving? And eventually we realize, it's this total emptiness, the potential creation. But so what I'm saying is we begin, we move from a formful check-in, like a yoga or a meditation, into a formless check-in. And we can use form to tune into the formless. Like we use meditation to connect to the formless. We use the ground we're standing on, which is form, to connect to the formless. But I would advise that the form you use have a route home. Don't just take a drug or, drink something. Whatever you have has to carry you back. And how you know if that's authentic is like what I said earlier. So your aggregate suffering decreases. You're traveling lighter. When you're checking in with one of those, let's say, doorways or formlessnesses. I've also heard things like, yeah, but I don't want to tune into the piece of what is, because that's not me. I want to get to the source of myself. I want to, this yearning in people to confront their source or their self directly. And what I haven't heard said before, which is very important, is that all of these facets or all of these things, the piece of what's here, if you can tune into the consistency of change or the solidity of the ground, they're all taking you to one place. They all lead to the same empty room. So you don't need to worry about, I'm not going to the right place. Like if I'm tuning into the piece of what's already here, oh no, that's just the piece of what's already here. That's not myself. No, it is. It is. They all lead. So they all lead there. You don't need to worry about going the wrong way. Even if you're enlightened, it doesn't mean that you don't go back to these things. It's kind of like in a game where you sort of level up or something, and then you get a value pack of stuff, and you can use that stuff at any time. It's no longer really to realize it anymore like we used to. We used to like settle into the ground to find the thing that was solid, but now we kind of know it's there, and then we know we can at any time just connect to it. And it's kind of like these little, like I said, like tools that our true nature kind of leaves with us to, go forward into the world with. Davie doesn't leave us empty-handed, it doesn't just leave us with the realization. It also leaves us with infinite access points. And just something for everything, really. If you're grieving, there's something. If you're scared, there's something. Yeah, so it could start with something as small as like holding someone's hand, or like looking at the clouds, or something that seems normal. And then it can kind of progress toward tuning into the solidity of the floor, or tuning into the changing, arising and passing, but actually these are all access points. They're all little doorways to what we are. And it's not like we need to embark on it like I need to find this thing, or, you just need to just go walk through the door. It's an empty room on the other side. Don't expect to find something when you walk through this doorway of comfort, or the doorway of solidity of the floor, or the doorway of arising and passing, because your true nature is no thing. So, how do we exactly know when we're tuning into a facet of our true nature? Because sometimes when you tune into your true nature, things can kind of get worse a bit before they get better. Or they can appear, like suffering can appear to increase just briefly, especially when you start like maybe feeling into emotions and stuff. If you're really going through one of these doorways, if you're actually tuning into a facet, there will be something in your experience that feels lighter. So even if something gets heavier, like maybe you're touching in on an emotion that you haven't allowed yourself to feel for decades, that's going to get stronger. But then if you notice carefully, there's also something that'll be getting relief. I'm finally approaching this, or I'm finally facing it. So whenever we tune into a facet of this, a good indicator would be a traveling lighter, a slight lightness. We don't need to, but sometimes, we can get crazy bliss and whatever, sudden emptiness, oh, there's nothing here, wow. But just to know you're on the right trajectory would be to just watch, is my suffering, my aggregate, my total suffering, decreasing? I've also had people come to me with the situation of, I'm feeling my emotions fully in an attempt to tune into that facet of my being. So I'm trying to face these traumas and stuff, but I'm getting completely sucked in, and I feel like it's tearing me apart. So if that's happening, you're identifying. So there's a difference between that and that feeling of lightness that I was talking about. So if you're really approaching your emotions, or if you're really approaching a facet of yourself, you're going to feel a lightness. If you feel like a pulling in, if you feel a contraction, or as I said, your aggregate suffering increasing, pause and reconsider your route. We don't really know what facet we can tune into, especially initially. We're like, is this even a facet? And no, but I don't want to bypass. And and of course, bypass is possible. Like if you're experiencing like a lot of nerves coming up, and then you tune into the solidity of the ground that's carrying you. Some people will experience a bypass of an emotion in that moment. And I used to think, okay, bypass is wholly bad. But now I'm starting to think that bypass is just another tool that you can also use if you really need it. If you're really, truly suffering, bypass it briefly with the facet of your true nature. It's only dangerous if you go overboard with the bypass, if you bypass your entire human experience. But we've been given this tool. We've been given this ability to tune into something like the emptiness, or the fact that this is a dream. This has been given to us, and we don't need to fear a bypass and then instead sink into suffering and get identified. What you focus on, you become. Where if you over-focus on suffering, you will become the sufferer. If you over-focus on awareness, you could bypass your experience. So it's like, how do we lend our focus to things equally so as not to bypass any part of the human experience as a whole, but still have a foot in the door of one of those facets, I would say, at all times.
Yeah, you've heard it 1,000 times before, but you are the entirety of the infinite, eternal ocean of true self, of being, awareness. And you wave, you ripple, you crash. This is how you express yourself. You manifest and recreate yourself in a multiplicity of ways. But you're not any one wave. As the ocean, you have freedom to give your attention to any one wave, and you can always rest back into yourself to sink beneath the turbulence of mind, the turbulence of thought, the turbulence of outward superficial experience, and rest back in to your depths, where you will find the deeper qualities of self beyond the egoic waves. Another way to say it is you can relax your attention. There are countless doorways back to a place of remembrance and a place of stability in what you are, knowing what you are, being what you are, consciously. And you can always tune into the formless qualities of what you are through form. You've manifested form, this playground, this science lab, this adventure playground through which to discover yourself in different ways. But you are not any one manifestation. And when you believe that you are, when you fixate and seem to become any part of that experience, there's always the possibility of relaxing, tracing back the point of laser focus back to the source, the boundless source of light. You can't lose yourself. There's no failure here, and there's no getting lost. How can you get lost in yourself? Because there's only yourself.
Yeah, so, as the ocean, like you said, there's no failure. Why? Because if you're the ocean, how many directions are there in which you can find yourself? How many directions can you move to find more water? It's infinite. You can go up, you can move down, side to side, diagonally. You can swim 100 meters down. There's no losing yourself as the ocean. However, if you hyperfixate as a wave and believe you're a wave, it's going to appear as though you only have one place to go. It's going to appear as though your fate is to crash on the shore. If you identify as a droplet, it's your fate to remain in this static position as the ocean sways you around. So, really, the only way, like you said, is to not fixate on being any limited part of this ocean. Only the ocean itself is limitless. As long as you're identifying as a limited part of it, you will feel limited. As long as your attention is placed on any limited quality of awareness, that's what you will perceive. So eventually, when you've realized that even the limited is limitless, you've noticed that, even this bottle of water on a desk is limitless in nature. The coin flips, but it's the same situation. So even if you look at the bottle of water, you're still looking at ocean. Even if you look at this human being in the mirror that appears separate, you're still looking at the ocean. For a while, it's going to feel like you're looking at a wave. But remind yourself that it's not the case. Even though a wave appears as a wave, where does the wave come from? You can't even say that the wave is separate from the ocean. And like you said, this analogy has been used so many times, but that's only because it's so good. So a wave only appears to be separate. But then it just sinks back in. It crashes on the shore and sinks back into itself. And you can think of that as, when you get totally overwhelmed by the form, your experience, the content, and you crash. You physically or mentally, psychologically, emotionally crash. And then you're just brought back. You're brought back again. You can never leave. You never leave. A wave is not leaving the ocean. It's just sinking, the water sinking into the sand and being drawn back in. And what I also wanted to say about attention is, I've heard Rupert Spira, which I somehow always manage to quote, say that when attention is retracted, it automatically rests in its source. So the retraction of attention is essentially the elimination of attention. Attention itself disappears when you trace it back to where it came from. And yes, at first, when you trace attention back, you're like, what? I feel like I'm in my head. But there's attention moving again. Attention has placed itself on the head. So release that. We want to suspend, and it's quite advanced, but we want to suspend attention on all form. And although attention by its nature can only cling to form, it cannot cling to what you are. So again, don't expect to be able to move your attention from the chaos of your life to the beauty of your formless nature. If it appears like attention has moved to true nature, it's only because your attention is focused on a manifestation of your true nature, like a feeling of peace. But that's still not you. And that's what you mentioned. That's where people get confused. They think, I lost it because I was briefly there. And then before I noticed, my attention actually didn't stay retracted. It went back into the feeling of peace that this glimpse gave me. It didn't stay in its place. It didn't stay put. And then it happens so subtly that we think, I've lost my true nature. We equate true nature with the symptoms of true nature or the experiences associated with it. And this is, again, the power of attention. The attention is what either holds on to realization or you appear to lose it. And ironically enough, the way you hold onto, so the way you sustain realization, is by releasing focus on your realization. Because once again, if you put focus on your realization, you're not putting focus on realization. You're putting focus on something in the manifest again. So you're subtly moving back into experience and you're going back into identification. And nothing in the manifest can last. Nothing. No sense of peace, no sense of no self. Any sense, anything you can put your attention on is not permanent. So again, how you sustain a realization is by not focusing on any of its byproducts. And you can do this easily by acting as a sort of spectator, which we hear about witness to your experience. When you have a Kundalini awakening, when you have a glimpse, step back, maintain the retraction of your attention. Do not give attention to this blissful experience that's accompanying it. And it's difficult to do, right? It's hard. We just want to jump into, this is so amazing. I want to tell everyone I'm enlightened and I finally saw it. But as best you can, maintain that static integrity of attention, so to speak, because of its power. And this I've practiced, so I know it to be true. I used to glimpse stuff and lose it all the time. And I only stopped losing it when I stopped focusing on what I'm losing. So when I stopped, and people also say this in the way of stop grasping, but I feel like that's not quite accurate enough. Because when I tried to not grasp, I was like, okay, not grasping, okay, I'm not grasping, okay, but you're subtly kind of waiting for this to either stay or go, or you want some kind of reassurance that it's not going to go away, and you're fearful of it. So, just right now, just decide, when that happens, I'm not going to put my attention on it. And it sounds like, I don't know, it sounds a bit dishonorable. Like I'm not gonna pay attention to any of the glimpses. but it's not quite what I mean. You'll see, you can't really resist, but there's something that stays put. So you're going to have a Kundalini awakening and you're going to be super blissful, but just always keep one foot in the door. Always keep your attention semi-static. Because as long as you go back out, you're being swayed again. And then very soon, identification takes its place again and identifies as the one that had the glimpse. And that's all through the power of attention.
Yeah. I really appreciated your definition of attention. Attention is localized awareness, condensed awareness. And what you attend to is solidified awareness. Attention creates the manifest. But attention is concentrated awareness. The manifest is made of the unmanifest. And you are that. You can pick any word that resonates. Consciousness, God, life, reality, the one, or no word. You're unbounded as the ocean. In fact, the shore, the ocean floor, and the sky are also made of you. That one essence, that one substance. You are the totality of reality. You are that central ontological fact. You can feel into that. It doesn't just have to be a concept that resonates on an intellectual level. Feel it. Feel what we're talking about, what we're pointing to on a sensory, energetic level, beneath the waves, the changeful waves, into the unchanging depths of what you are, beneath the mind, into the body, beyond the body, into what you truly are. These are just all access points. There's no true limitation. There's only limiting beliefs, and no belief is true. Therefore, the mind, which is only thought, does not make reality. It only interprets it. So there are no beliefs that can truly limit what you are. Those beliefs are just simply ways of knowing yourself. You believe that you are a body. Okay, it's a belief. It's just a means for self-knowledge. You experience objects. Well, those objects are not objects. They only seem like objects because there's a belief applied to that particular portion of what you are. That portion of what you are is blended in what you are. Like a wave is totally seamlessly blended with its infinite body. So, like you said, nothing in the manifest superficial expression of what you are lasts. Nothing remains. Experience is transient, but what is permanent? That's you. And it turns out that the transient is made of the permanent.
That was very important. I found that very important because we think that our thinking is reality. That's the assumption at first. So that's literally what has created this whole seeking thing. The whole belief that we are separate originates from the belief, like the sub-belief, that we are our thoughts. And we don't mean, you believe you're a thought. I mean, obviously you don't. You think you're a person, right? Thinking thoughts. So to state that more accurately, it's more like we believe that our thoughts describe reality accurately. So, like you said, the mind interprets reality, right? But an interpretation is by nature subjective. It's subjective. That's why people who grow up on like a remote island, like for example, there's like this tribe called the Sentinelese that's never interacted with our world. They haven't even discovered fire yet. So to use fire, they wait for lightning to strike a tree, and that's how they get their fire. So someone from there, right, they have an entirely different idea of reality to what we may have, purely as a result of their mind's interpretation, the culture in which they're raised, their particular religious beliefs. Certain religions, especially individuals that are very religious in those religions, believe in, for example, like the afterlife or the security of heaven, things like that. And obviously I have no idea. I've never been to heaven, so I don't know whether that is a thing or not. But the thing is that belief itself, whether true or not, carries with it a sense of safety. So your mind is interpreting reality as, I can walk around here and die at any time and I'm going to reach heaven's gates in no time, so it's okay. What do you think that does to levels of like anxiety when encountering a physical threat for harm? As opposed to someone who believes, if I die, that's tickets for me. This is it. If I die, it was just this body, that's all I was. So even though these themes that I'm talking about are in line with what we talk about, I could mention anything. The belief that if I walk outside my apartment right now, that a piano is going to fall on my head and crush me, that's going to stop me from going outside my apartment, right? Someone who feels like they're entirely safe to leave their house is going to feel freedom. So this is, again, the power of interpretation, the power of believing your thoughts. Mind can never talk accurately about true nature. Never, ever, 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 ever. So, and that's just, it's just a fact. It's a fact. So that's why we always say, like, how do we talk about this? Because if you really tune into this empty room, this no thing, as we say, you realize that this is absolutely uninterpretable by the mind. So if you're able to interpret something, that's a little bit of a signal that that's in the manifest. Like a feeling of peace is interpretable. A feeling of bliss is interpretable. Emptiness, okay, more vague, but interpretable. And that's why these things are transient. Anything that is interpreted, anything that can be interpreted, moves and changes. So we have like this attention, right? Attention is very difficult to interpret. If you just try interpret attention, you don't quite know what to say about it. You can kind of tell that, okay, it can move, right? It can move. It can emphasize, yes, expand, contract, emphasize. However, this is way more abstract and way more difficult to interpret than a feeling of peace. Feeling of peace, I could say, oh wow, I got home and I felt like I didn't need to do anything. None of my problems were bothering me. You can say so much more about peace or about, anything at all in the manifest, about your dog, about your lover, about your job. You can talk all day about it, but attention itself, which is this planted seed for us to use that traces back to our true nature, we can barely say anything about, and that's a good sign. Mind does not know what to do with attention. That's why attention kind of goes places, and then mind puts itself on the things that attention has placed itself. So mind never faces attention directly because it actually can't. So when you start to look at attention, like if you're doing Vipassana and you start to trace attention and you're starting to look at this mechanism, you'll realize that mind ceases. Mind stops trying because they can't interpret what you're doing anymore. And that's when people think, oh, like I'm so confused. Like I'm so confused, I don't know what's going on. But that's just the suspension of the mind's understanding. Don't think that because your mind has stopped understanding what's happening on your path, that you're going the wrong way. That actually means you're going the total right way. Like this is a discussion I have with my husband often because he has OCD, which is, for those who don't know, obsessive compulsive disorder, and something that's very, very important for many people who experience OCD or OCD symptoms is knowing, checking, knowing, being sure of something. So he experienced this crazy difficulty along his path where he had to know awareness. He had to check that it's there all the time as like a reassurance. So what mind did was appropriate the understanding of true nature and turn it into the obsessive compulsive mechanism. So it's only because of him that I even realized that this is a thing. Like when I started to lose my knowing, so to speak, my mind could no longer say anything about what was going on. I was like, yes, this is great. But for others, it seems it might lead to uncertainty. How do I know I am formless if I can't feel it? How do I know? How do I know? That's the thing. You can't know. At some point, you must suspend the interpreter, because it's just a dead end. This road stops for the mind. And, you can never learn it. You can never learn. I'm sitting here like 2 or 3 years later, my mind still cannot interpret true nature. And the more of mind you lose, the better. The less you can interpret, the better. The more you're interpreting, the more rigidity there actually is. You're still identified. How much can you say about your personality? You can say so much about your personality. How much can you say about the body and its preferences? The thing you think you are. You can talk about all day. And we don't, because we don't want to be, full of ourselves and all that. But you actually could. You could talk about your past. You could discuss that forever. Your future, your dreams, your embarrassments, your goals, your fears. I mean, you can do that. Nothing against that. But it's just a signal that you're in the wrong realm. You want to skew more toward the stuff you can't talk about. Like for example, when you trace attention back, retract attention. Right now my attention's on this water bottle. If I just pull it back, stop noticing the water bottle, briefly, there's something there that can't be discussed. You can't say anything about it. It's just a split second, because attention is so used to moving back out. So I bring my attention back from the water bottle, and for a second, something is not. It's not like something happens. It's that something is not. And then my attention goes back out again to the screen over here. And so it's through this practice of like bringing our attention back that we somehow begin to realize the formless nature of attention itself and what it funnels back into, which is awareness, our true nature. Could say they are the same thing, even though, like I said, we have our own individual attention, but that does not mean it's separate. It's like someone who I know, I don't remember who it was, compared it to like those little eyes on a fly. Just because each little eye out of 100 eyes is seeing a different angle, that's you and me. It doesn't mean they're on a different fly. So that's attention. They're still the eyes of God. Attention is still the eye of God. It's just like kind of through a spyglass, focused. So the thing that actually, as formless as we can get, you can say that, change never leaves. Inconsistency is consistent, or there's always an underlying piece. But something even closer that you don't even need to look for is your attention. So as soon as you wake up in the morning, you have attention. You have that faculty, and you can retract it. You can bring it back. And don't look for something to bring it back to. When people say, put attention on yourself, put attention on your being, you're looking for something, but it actually is the suspension of attention, or as you said earlier, the relaxing of focus.
Yeah. There can be this sort of clash. So we're told you are the true self, you are unlimited, yet we're experiencing these finite points of focus. It doesn't make any sense. There's a clash there. Or we might have a glimpse of the whole and then kind of feel contracted again, limited, because our conceptual interpretations of what we are, of reality, conceal the truth of reality. Names produce form, and form creates limitation. And this conceptualizing process we call mind prevents the recognition of truth, produces forgetfulness. The perception of limitation and separation engenders the search for completeness and the fear of death ultimately. This is the product of Maya, illusion, which covers the actual, cloaks the unmanifest in erroneous ideas. True self seems to be out of sight, hidden, unreachable, unknowable, and this is the catalyst for our journey, our searching. Yes, those points of attention seem to conceal what you are, but actually, if you discern the true nature of any given point, given that there's only you, then you find that actually those experiences reveal what you are. They are the revelation of self, because you are always exploring your infinite potential. No one experience can capture your entirety because you are infinite. Infinite reality is transcendent, but it's also immanent. It's here. It's known as the I am, which you intuit as the aliveness, as consciousness, but also as every experience. So the entirety of your present experience is only that. There's nothing mystical or strange or even spiritual about this. This is just reality as it is, and it's what you are, expressing yourself through a multiplicity of points of attention. That word non-duality is not saying anti-duality in so much as anti-expression of duality. It's saying the truth of duality is the non-dual. In the words of Khalil Gibran, I discovered the secret of the sea in meditation upon the dewdrop. So at first, the dewdrop seems so small, so limited. When you feel into it in the tantric sense, just feel into it with the intention to inquire, what is the truth of this experience? And I'm saying the dewdrop can be any experience. What's the truth of this experience? What's the reality? What's the deeper essence of this experience? You find only see. You discover only see there. Remove the labels, drop the ideas about what you're experiencing, and you will find that the dewdrop is not limited to a little speck of attention. It's actually only the whole.
Yeah, we kind of embark on this journey and we end up right back where we started. First, like what I'm suggesting is to retract your attention, right? And what that is like you could say inward movement. In Advaita, they call it Advaita Vedanta. Even though it's not inward because you don't have a location, yourself is non-local. We just say inward because it's like a movement toward self. So this retraction of attention that we've been talking about is the inward path. It's also the inward path to, for example, focus on the sense of being, or focus on the I am or presence. All of these are inward paths. And so that's one side. That's one of the truths, one of the two truths of being. Then when we've established that and how that feels, or how you know you've done that, is throughout, no matter what happens in your experience, there's something that knows itself as beyond this throughout. So I'm not saying this is the final, we're not done yet, but for example, that I am the witness of everything that's happening. There's a detachment from the subjective reality, so detachment from life, like the experiences and the character of the person, the personality, and you have an identity as something, as a facet. So you have an identity as the I am. So you say, oh wow, I realize that I'm just a sense of being. I've always just been the sense of being. I don't need to focus on any of this stuff anymore. No, I have no problems. And that's the initial awakening that many people think, okay, I'm done. When actually you're not. You're kind of on top of the mountain, but you still need to walk down, and that's what we'll talk about now. So that by checking, okay, do I always know myself as something other than what's in the manifest? So some people may know themselves as awareness, like I said. Some people may know themselves as the I am, a sense of being. My point is that you have stepped back from experience. You feel a clear distance, and things don't sway you as much as they did before. And you're also simultaneously exploring certain traits of this thing. So if you identify now as awareness, you realize, wow, I'm actually limitless, and I can't believe I thought I was a person, and all that. So that's the one side. Now, there's the other side of Advaita called Advaita Tantra. And, contrary to what people believe about Tantra, it's not this one-dimensional, thing, subject to touchy subject. It's actually when you come back down this non-dual mountain and begin to integrate your human beingness back into the realization. So you think that you're taking what you had at the top of the mountain. You kind of think, Senna, you found this pot of gold, and this pot of gold is called I'm awareness, and you're ready to take the pot of gold down the mountain. But every step you take down the mountain, it's like a bar of gold falls out your basket with every step. So as you go down this mountain, you begin to integrate. This is when these paradoxes start to clash. You start to realize, but what is going on? Like, I thought I was awareness, but how come I'm still getting individual thoughts? Why am I still affected by the loss of a loved one? Why can't I suppress my grief, even though I'm formless awareness? All of these things happen as we're kind of trotting down the mountain. And that's what I'm referring to as this like loss of the gold blocks. It's like you start to think, oh my God, I'm not actually what I thought I was on top of the mountain. I'm actually something else. I'm not human, and I'm not awareness, because awareness, or whatever I found myself to be, that identification that had that hyper focus on when we went inward for so much, starts to lose its integrity, structural integrity. And then this is the product, the paradoxes that begin to clash. The human against your new identity, like going ka, 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 ka. And eventually you realize, oh, I'm upholding something. I was placing focus on something. So I had retracted myself too much. Even though it's necessary, we need to do it. But it's a realization in hindsight, like, oh, I actually took too much onto my identity. And now we shed even the identity of the formless quality we believed ourselves to be. And again, to quote Rupert, I've heard him say, awareness, true nature, anything that you can identify with that changes your experience is simply a thorn to remove a thorn. So we douse our experience in awareness or being to dilute our identification with form. And then when we're at the bottom of the mountain, so to speak, we've lost all our gold. We're as poor as we ever were before we ascended the mountain. But yet, we are no longer a thing. And from then, it's this constant play of these opposites. And like you said, they're not actually opposite because there's only one thing happening. But, just throughout, on a daily basis, I experience this overwhelming peace, and then someone makes me angry. And then oh, but I'm so expansive. And then I feel stressed about a meeting. And it's this tossing and turning of these two sides of duality. But together they create the formless. They form together non-duality. Picking a side of duality is not non-duality. Picking the enlightened side of duality is not one. That's you choosing one, and there's still another one that's kind of lurking. That's two. So this play of paradox, this play of the two sides, this play of the emptiness in the fullness, and the peace amidst the chaos, that is it. You can't permanently settle in either one of those things. It's not possible. It's good news that you can't settle into chaos forever. And it might appear as bad news that you can't settle into peace forever, but you'd be doing a disservice to reality. It's exactly in the middle where one finds oneself, just at almost suspended. And even though you sway from side to side, you don't even actually move. Because by the time you've reached the bottom of the mountain, you realize that, you actually circled back around. The mountain route took you back to where you began. There was never a problem. All of this was always formless. All of this was always you. It was always empty, always peaceful.
Exactly. It's not either a person or space-like awareness. It's both the expression we're calling the person and awareness, which is the origin, the very essence of the expression we're calling the person. You are always awareness, and sometimes you express yourself as the person. To quote Nisargadatta Maharaj, the person merges into the witness into awareness, awareness into pure being. Yet identity is not lost, only its limitations are lost. It is transfigured and becomes the real self, the Sadguru, the eternal friend and guide. Often on this path we start off doing some practice like meditation, and we find that we are the witness. I'm not the person. I can witness, I can observe the person. I can observe the body, I can observe the mind, I can observe the sense of self, the egoic core of contraction, the southward-facing path, as you said, the inward-facing path, the path of discrimination, the path of negation. Not this, not this. Identity is not lost. You can still experience yourself as a person. You can still go about and do your thing and enjoy what you enjoy and have relationships. Yet you know yourself as unlimited. You're not limited to anything you experience, anything you do, any part of the persona. Your limitations are lost. You are transfigured. You know yourself as the self, and there is permission to be anything you might choose to be as the self. It's important not just to, drop the false ideas and see that the world is unreal and only consciousness is real and your awareness is real, to release your attention from the objective content of experience, because we've been so hyper-focused on all of that stuff, as we've been saying. It's important to recognize that the very nature of content is experiencing itself, and to recognize that no experience is limited to what it seems to be. You explore objective experience. You find there's no difference between you, the subject, and the objects you're aware of. And this is love. This is the collapse of this apparent divide between you and I. We are one. We are wholeness. Together. In language, that makes no sense. How can we be both whole and together? How can we experience one another and be this whole? It makes no sense, logically. But in reality, we are one, and we're experiencing this togetherness. Knowing that this togetherness is not actual in the absolute sense, yet we, as the I, as the whole, permit this beautiful expression of togetherness, and we call that love.
Yeah, I think just like the last thing, I think I've said everything except for like one, and that's just like, imagine trying to find the water as a droplet, or like I've heard people say, I think it was by Marshall McLuhan, a philosopher of media studies, who said something similar. He said, I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't a fish. So, that's how it can feel when you're looking for what you are. Because you're literally this fish or this water droplet immersed in water. How can you, for you to find what you are, you almost need to find what you're not, and that's not possible actually. I mean, I know, yes, neti and all that, but I mean, on absolute level, there's nothing which is not you. So how do you find yourself in comparison to what is not yourself? For us to find a plant, we need to know how a plant differs from a rock. We can't find a plant if we don't know how it differs from anything else. So this is also part of the tantric path, or coming down the mountain, this beginning to find yourself in everything. So this kind of, it's an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. At first, this concealment, it acts as a concealment. The fact that everything is made of you hides you, appears to hide you, because you can't differentiate between what's you and what's not. So that's the truth, right? That's the truth. Everything is the same one thing, which makes finding that one thing incredibly difficult. However, once you realize, okay, there's this formless thing, and it looks to me like it might make up everything else, you can start to look in objects, look in the finite for this self. And we've spoken about before, you look with your awareness or attention, you realize, oh, attention creates this water bottle right next to me. If my attention is not on the water bottle, I can't distinguish between that and a background or that and the wall. So attention is the substrate, so to speak, of the manifest. And so now we begin to use this to our advantage. We begin to use the fact that we're a droplet in the ocean, indistinguishable, to our advantage. Whereas before it was a concealing. Now it's an expanding. Now it's a learning. Now it's like an assumption. You can say, okay, I know everything is made of me, and the things that I don't see are made of me just require a little bit of extra looking. Because I know it's just the ocean, like a drop in the ocean, and that's why it's hard. But at least now I know that I'm the ocean, and there's just this one drop that's still standing out. So that's what I then place my attention on. You see, so now we turn flipping it around. At first we said things that stand separate, we said leave them, remove attention. Now we're saying things that stand separate after you've established yourself, return your attention, return your new refined attention. Now that you know the source of where attention comes from, return it to objects, return it to form. Bring it to the separation that still remains, which might be a lot, it might be a little, it might be facets of the personality, it might be trauma, it might be physical objects. A lot of people complain about vision and say that they can't see stuff in the visual field as made of the formlessness, in which case, like I said, you bring attention to it and you see, oh, attention, this formless thing is creating this. That's how you do that. And and at the end, like you said, there's no paradox. You experience paradox up until these two things face each other directly, and it almost just like they just coalesce, and that's that. Then there's only one truth. There's only one truth remaining, and that is you. And you are everything, and you are this and that and neither. You are limited, unlimited, and beyond the concept of both. You're a person, you are infinite, but you are neither. And that is the perfect non-duality. It's being all the things or none of them, and both at the same time.